When you first hear the title, The Huntsman, Winter's War, there's this immediate sense of legacy and continuity, like it's both a sequel and a companion piece to Snow White and the Huntsman. And honestly, that's exactly what it's trying to be. A bridge between the dark, fairy tale reinterpretation of the original Grimm stories and a more expansive fantasy universe that delves into the backstories and motivations of characters we only glimpsed in the first movie. Watching the trailer initially, the first thing that hits you is the sheer visual contrast between the two worlds being set up. The frozen, almost crystalline expanse of the north, where the Ice Queen Freya rules, versus the warmer, more familiar settings tied to Ravenna's past, with the lush forests and battle-worn kingdoms that the Huntsman has moved through. There's an immediate visual storytelling happening even before any lines are delivered. It's clever because it communicates a tonal shift. We're not just revisiting the same story, we're expanding the mythology. Chris Hemsworth, reprising his role as the Huntsman, carries a very different energy this time around. In the original film, he was brooding and reluctant, the quintessential reluctant hero with a heavy sense of duty. In the trailer for Winter's War, he's not only more confident, but there's a subtle weariness in his eyes, like he's lived through battles that have left him physically and emotionally scarred. It's a kind of quiet resilience, a gravitas that immediately tells the audience, this is a man who has endured tremendous loss, but has not lost his capacity for moral clarity. That alone sets up expectations for the narrative. Hemsworth isn't here just for action sequences. His character arc is meant to carry emotional weight, reflecting on past choices and the cost of vengeance, loyalty, and love. Then there's Emily Blunt as Freya, the Ice Queen. The trailer emphasizes her dominion over this icy kingdom, with sweeping shots of frozen lakes and snow-covered battlements. Her power is visually tangible. The way snow and ice respond to her gestures, the way her soldiers move with near military precision, and the almost ritualistic way she commands obedience. Blunt's Freya is a fascinating character because the trailer teases both empathy and terror. You see glimpses of her pain, her loss of a child, which is hinted at through subtle imagery rather than exposition. But juxtaposed against the coldness of her rule, it raises questions about morality and the consequences of grief. It's a reminder that in these fairy tale universes, villains are often defined not just by cruelty, but by deep-seated human emotions twisted into extremes. The trailer does a smart job of showing her as multidimensional without revealing the full arc, which keeps anticipation high. Jessica Chastain, returning as the Red Queen, Ravenna's sister, adds an entirely different energy to the mix. The trailer frames her almost as a bridge between the original film's darkness and the new narrative's complexity. She's regal, dangerous, and manipulative, but you can sense undercurrents of vulnerability and obsession that will likely drive some of the conflicts. The trailer hints at the interplay between her and Freya, which suggests that the film is less about a straightforward battle of good versus evil, and more about nuanced political and emotional warfare among powerful women, each with her own agenda. This dynamic is subtle in the trailer, but incredibly compelling, because it promises a narrative richer than standard fantasy tropes. Visually, the trailer is aggressive in its attempt to establish tone and stakes. There's a sequence where Hemsworth rides through a forest at night, chasing some unknown enemy, and the cinematography uses low-angle tracking shots to communicate urgency and scale. Then it cuts to wide shots of Freya's army marching over frozen tundra, the metallic glint of armor against white snow, creating a stark contrast that immediately conveys the world-building ambition of the film. The trailer doesn't shy away from action, but it doesn't overwhelm it with it either. It's clear that director Cedric Nicholas Troyan wanted to balance spectacle with story. Every shot of ice magic, sword fighting, or environmental wonder feels purposeful rather than filler. One of the most interesting trailer beats involves a moment of tension between Hemsworth's Huntsman and Blunt's Freya. The dialogue is minimal, just a line or two, but the expression and tone suggest a complicated history and potential alliance or betrayal. These beats are crucial because they promise the film isn't just a visual spectacle. It's also about character relationships, strategy, and moral ambiguity. You get a sense that the filmmakers are aware that the audience today expects more than fairy tale archetypes. They want complex interactions, motivations, and stakes that feel earned rather than imposed. The soundtrack in the trailer is also worth analyzing. There's a sweeping orchestral score, punctuated by choral elements that evoke a sense of grandeur and melancholy. It rises and falls in a way that mirrors the narrative beats teased in the trailer. The tension, the heartbreak, the thrill of the action. Sound design is a subtle but essential storytelling tool in trailers, and here it works to immerse the viewer, to communicate scale and emotion without requiring a single explanatory line. One of the things that stands out in this trailer is how it visually sets up the duality between the Ice Queen and the Huntsman's world. The cinematography makes use of color grading to emphasize this contrast. Cool, almost bluish tones dominate the north, creating a feeling of isolation, coldness, and danger, whereas warmer, earthy tones are used in sequences tied to Hemsworth's past or to the Red Queen, evoking familiarity, nostalgia, and human connection. This duality is foundational to the story's thematic framework: love versus duty, warmth versus coldness, humanity versus supernatural power. Even the pacing of the trailer is deliberate. It starts slowly, establishing environment and tone, then escalates with flashes of action, sword fights, arrow volleys, magical confrontations, but never becomes chaotic. There's an intentional rhythm to the editing that suggests the film itself may favor measured tension over relentless, disjointed spectacle. This is a positive sign, especially for viewers who found the original Snow White and the Huntsman to be visually overwhelming at times. The trailer communicates that this sequel, or prequel, depending on how you see it, wants to balance character development, world building, and action sequences with an emotional through line. Another point that's easy to overlook but critical is the trailer's use of environmental storytelling. Even in short glimpses, you can infer a lot about the world. Shattered villages hint at past conflicts, distant castles suggest political intrigue, and frozen forests filled with lurking creatures evoke both wonder and peril. These small details create a sense that the filmmakers wanted this to be more than just a story about a few central characters. They are building a fully realized, lived-in universe. The audience is being invited to engage with the world, speculate on histories, and anticipate the kinds of adventures and conflicts that will unfold. There's also a thematic subtlety that the trailer communicates effectively: the notion of legacy and redemption. Hemsworth's Huntsman isn't just fighting external enemies, he's confronting the consequences of past actions. Freya, while seemingly villainous, is also a character shaped by profound loss. The trailer frames these struggles in parallel, suggesting that the story may explore how trauma, grief, and power intersect. It's not spelled out overtly, but the visual storytelling, the performances, and the music all work together to hint at this thematic complexity. The trailer also teases several set pieces that hint at inventive action choreography. For instance, there's a brief sequence where warriors clash atop icy cliffs, with magic-enhanced combat creating visually arresting moments. It's clear that the production team invested heavily in stunt coordination, practical effects, and CGI integration. The goal seems to be immersive action that feels physically grounded, even when it intersects with fantastical elements. In other words, the audience can expect sequences that are both thrilling and believable within the internal logic of the fantasy world. What's particularly interesting is how the trailer positions Jessica Chastain's character in relation to both Hemsworth and Blunt. There are fleeting moments where alliances seem tentative, gestures hint at tension, and the framing suggests that her role may be pivotal in influencing outcomes, rather than simply acting as a secondary antagonist. The trailer doesn't give away the specifics, but it makes it clear that the interpersonal dynamics will carry as much weight as the magical battles themselves. Additionally, there's an understated elegance to the trailer's visual effects. The ice magic isn't just flashy, it feels tactile, almost sculptural. Snowflakes swirl with a sense of intention, ice formations appear as extensions of Freya's emotion or willpower, and even the lighting interacts naturally with the environment. It's a level of detail that speaks to a production that wants its fantasy elements to have texture, weight, and believability, rather than relying purely on spectacle. And finally, the trailer leaves you with a sense of anticipation, without relying on traditional cliffhangers. It doesn't end on a single question or dramatic reveal. Instead, it gives the audience enough context, intrigue, and visual excitement to feel compelled to see the film, while still preserving the mystery of key plot points. That's a smart move, because it respects the audience's intelligence and curiosity, rather than manipulating them with overblown suspense tactics. It signals that the movie itself aims to be engaging on multiple levels: emotional, visual, and narrative. So, as you absorb the trailer for The Huntsman, Winter's War, you notice that it's doing a lot more than just marketing. It's providing a condensed emotional and thematic summary of what the film aspires to achieve. The interplay between Hemsworth, Blunt, and Chastain sets up a narrative full of moral ambiguity, power struggles, and personal redemption arcs. The visual storytelling establishes a contrast-rich environment, where frozen landscapes, warm interiors, and dynamic battles communicate scale and stakes. The soundtrack amplifies tension and grandeur without overwhelming subtlety, and the pacing, editing, and character framing all suggest a film that is trying to balance spectacle with substance, offering viewers both adrenaline-fueled action and an emotionally resonant story. The trailer essentially invites the audience to imagine a world where every duel, glance, and spell has significance, where the beauty and danger of the universe are intimately connected, and where characters are shaped by history, grief, and desire in ways that feel authentic. And while some might initially approach it as just another fantasy blockbuster, a closer look reveals ambition, an attempt to expand a fairy tale universe into something cinematic, morally complex, and visually memorable. That's the promise that the trailer conveys, and it sets the stage for a film that aspires to be more than just its predecessor, seeking to give depth to its characters, stakes, and the frozen kingdom at the heart of its story. The story of The Huntsman, Winter's War opens in a way that immediately establishes the emotional stakes, while expanding the universe of the original film. It begins with the backstory of Freya, the Ice Queen, long before she became the cold, calculating ruler we meet in the present timeline. As a young woman, Freya is shown experiencing a tragic loss, the death of her child, which becomes the defining moment of her life. It's a clever storytelling device because it humanizes what could otherwise be a one-dimensional villain. Her grief transforms into an obsession with control, which is mirrored in the icy kingdom she creates. Every architectural detail, from the jagged, frost-covered towers to the crystalline battlements, symbolizes her internalized pain and the cold detachment she has cultivated to shield herself from further heartbreak. This opening sequence sets the tone. The film is interested in character motivation as much as it is in spectacular fantasy visuals. Chris Hemsworth's Huntsman is reintroduced in a reflective state, marked by years of wandering, battle, and loyalty to those he once loved. The narrative immediately signals that he carries the weight of history on his shoulders. The Huntsman isn't just an action hero. He is a man shaped by consequences, responsible for lives lost, and guided by a moral compass that often puts him at odds with power. His scenes are interspersed with quiet moments, emphasizing that his strength is as much internal as it is physical. You see him moving through familiar landscapes, each step layered with personal history, subtly reminding the audience of the interconnectedness of the events from the first movie and this one. The story quickly establishes the tension between Freya and her estranged sister Ravenna, now deceased, but present in memory and influence through Jessica Chastain's portrayal of her earlier years as the Red Queen. The complex familial relationships are central to the narrative, as the film explores the psychological and emotional consequences of power, envy, and betrayal. The Red Queen's lust for dominion is mirrored in Freya's icy fortress, highlighting the inherited and learned traits of cruelty and ambition. The narrative doesn't just depict these as traits, it frames them as responses to loss, fear, and unfulfilled desire, which adds a layer of sophistication to the classic fairy tale archetypes. The Huntsman is soon called into conflict, not by a direct villainous force, but by circumstance and the machinations of characters with their own agendas. Early in the story, he is drawn into a mission that feels personal and political at the same time. The film emphasizes the interconnection of personal vendettas and larger geopolitical consequences, a narrative choice that gives weight to otherwise fantastical conflicts. As the Huntsman navigates treacherous forests, snow-covered mountains, and fortified castles, each environment becomes a narrative tool, reflecting the character's internal struggles. For example, Freya's ice palace isn't merely a set piece, it is an externalization of her emotional state. And as the Huntsman approaches, the cinematography underscores the tension between human vulnerability and supernatural dominance. Emily Blunt's Freya is portrayed with an intricate balance of menace and vulnerability. The story frequently cuts between her present rule and past trauma, creating a layered understanding of her motivations. Her soldiers, the Huntsman's allies, and various magical creatures populate her kingdom, each serving as extensions of her will. The narrative doesn't rely solely on exposition. Instead, Freya's actions, her calculated cruelty, moments of tenderness, and strategic manipulations demonstrate who she is and why she operates as she does. The audience is invited to engage in moral reflection, asking themselves whether Freya's icy detachment is a choice, a defense mechanism, or both. Jessica Chastain's Red Queen, while no longer the central antagonist, remains a pivotal figure through her influence and legacy. Flashbacks and interactions with the Huntsman and Freya reveal the depth of her cunning, the consequences of her ambition, and the lingering shadow she casts over all events. The story smartly avoids turning her into a simple foil. Instead, it portrays her as a complex character whose presence shapes the decisions of everyone in the narrative. Through her, the film interrogates themes of jealousy, power, and the corrosive effects of envy on personal relationships. These themes are woven into the story subtly, enhancing the stakes without bogging down the pacing. The Huntsman's journey in the narrative is as much about internal reconciliation as it is about external conflict. He is haunted by past decisions, particularly those involving Ravenna and his promise to protect others at any cost. These personal stakes drive his actions more than abstract notions of heroism. Early scenes illustrate his proficiency as a warrior, but also his restraint, empathy, and strategic thinking. Unlike many fantasy films where the protagonist is a blunt instrument of action, the Huntsman's intelligence and moral deliberation are central to his character, making each confrontation meaningful beyond the choreography. The story introduces new magical elements tied to the Ice Kingdom. Freya's power extends beyond simple environmental manipulation. It affects the physical and emotional states of those around her. For example, her magic creates illusions that test the loyalty and courage of her adversaries, and it manipulates perceptions to maintain her authority. These sequences are both visually captivating and narratively significant because they force characters, particularly the Huntsman and his allies, to confront inner fears and unresolved guilt. Magic here is not just a spectacle. It's a narrative device that amplifies character development and thematic resonance. One of the early plot threads involves a mission to recover or protect a magical artifact that has consequences for both Freya's Ice Kingdom and the larger realm. This element introduces tension and drives the Huntsman into direct conflict with both external forces and moral dilemmas. He must navigate not only physical danger, but also ethical decisions, balancing loyalty, personal desire, and the greater good. The narrative frames these challenges in a way that keeps the stakes tangible. The world itself is at risk, but so are the characters' identities, allegiances, and emotional integrity. As the story unfolds, the narrative emphasizes the duality between love and power. Freya's loss and emotional detachment contrast sharply with the Huntsman's connections to other characters, particularly those formed in the first film. These relationships are tested throughout the story, as alliances shift and betrayals emerge. The tension is continuous, but it is never gratuitous. Every plot point connects back to character motivations or thematic concerns. The film explores how grief, love, and desire for power intersect, creating conflicts that feel organic rather than imposed for spectacle. The narrative also introduces new characters who challenge the Huntsman both physically and morally. Each new ally or adversary serves as a narrative mirror, reflecting his strengths, weaknesses, and unresolved issues. These interactions allow the audience to see different facets of his character: his strategic mind, empathy, decisiveness, and occasional vulnerability. The story treats these characters as integral to the world building, not mere plot devices, which enhances the realism and depth of the narrative. A particularly striking sequence early in the story involves a confrontation atop a frozen lake. The sequence is a showcase of the film's visual effects and stunt coordination, but it's also narratively rich. The ice beneath the characters' feet is unstable, symbolizing the precariousness of alliances, the fragility of trust, and the unpredictability of the world they inhabit. The scene is tense not just because of the immediate physical danger, but also because of the interpersonal stakes. Decisions made in moments of peril have lasting consequences. It's a brilliant example of action serving story rather than the other way around. Magic and environment continue to serve as extensions of character psychology throughout the narrative. Freya's spells, the icy terrain, and the manipulation of weather all tie back to the emotional states of central characters. The story frequently juxtaposes external conflicts with internal ones. The frost that threatens the realm mirrors Freya's internal coldness, while the warmth of human connection and loyalty is visually and narratively emphasized in sequences involving the Huntsman and his allies. These contrasts deepen the audience's engagement, making every visual cue and magical effect meaningful within the story. The first act also establishes the larger political landscape. Various kingdoms and factions are affected by the Ice Queen's rule, and the story hints at broader conflicts that extend beyond the immediate characters. This layer of political intrigue adds complexity, situating personal vendettas within a wider, realistic context of governance, loyalty, and power dynamics. It's an intelligent way to prevent the narrative from feeling insular, giving the audience a sense that the stakes are not only emotional and magical, but also geopolitical. As the narrative progresses into the second act, the story deepens its focus on Freya's inner conflict and the lingering effects of her past. Her court is not merely an assembly of loyal soldiers, it reflects her need for control and the psychological imprint of grief. The soldiers she commands are disciplined, trained not just in combat but in loyalty, their very presence reinforcing her authority. The narrative uses these characters strategically, highlighting how the Ice Queen's influence extends beyond magical domination. It's a regime built on fear, precision, and subtle manipulation. Her interactions with the Huntsman, when they occur, are charged with layers of tension. There's a mixture of recognition, curiosity, and suppressed resentment, all visually and emotionally conveyed, giving weight to each scene. The Huntsman's journey in this act is increasingly defined by moral complexity. He encounters obstacles that force him to weigh his personal feelings against a broader sense of duty. For example, he is faced with characters who appeal to his empathy, challenging him to consider alternative solutions to conflict, rather than defaulting to combat. These interactions serve dual purposes. They flesh out the world, showing the diversity of people affected by Freya's rule, and they illuminate the Huntsman's character as someone who navigates ethical dilemmas with thoughtfulness and pragmatism. It's a notable departure from standard fantasy protagonists, who often resolve challenges through sheer force alone. Emily Blunt's portrayal of Freya continues to be compelling, particularly in scenes that juxtapose her maternal vulnerability with ruthless governance. One pivotal sequence in this act involves Freya observing a moment of defiance among her own troops. The camera lingers on her expression, subtle shifts in the furrow of her brow, the tension in her jaw, the tightening of her fingers, as she considers both punishment and reasoning. These moments communicate her internal struggle without relying on exposition, which speaks to both Blunt's performance and the director's visual storytelling. Jessica Chastain's Red Queen, while physically absent for much of the story's present timeline, exerts influence through legacy and narrative framing. Flashbacks illustrate her cunning, strategic brilliance, and emotional complexity, particularly in her relationship with Freya. The contrast between the sisters, one defined by grief, the other by ambition, provides thematic resonance throughout the act. The narrative doesn't rely on simplistic good versus evil constructs. Instead, it interrogates how personal loss, envy, and desire for power shape the choices characters make. This thematic sophistication elevates the story beyond standard fairy tale retellings, demanding the audience's attention to subtle interpersonal dynamics. The act also expands on the mystical elements of the world. Freya's ice magic is increasingly sophisticated, demonstrating both aesthetic spectacle and narrative function. She manipulates not only the environment, but also perception, creating illusions that test the moral and psychological limits of the Huntsman and his allies. These sequences are crafted with meticulous attention to continuity and consequence. Every magical action has repercussions that influence character decisions, plot direction, and the stakes of ensuing conflicts. The integration of magic and character psychology reinforces the story's ambition to merge fantasy spectacle with meaningful storytelling. The Huntsman's relationship with his allies becomes a central narrative focus in this act. These relationships are tested in high-stakes situations, highlighting themes of trust, loyalty, and sacrifice. There's a pivotal scene where the Huntsman must decide whether to risk himself for an ally in immediate danger or focus on the broader objective of thwarting Freya's plans. The tension is heightened by the narrative's commitment to realistic consequences. Decisions carry weight, and the outcomes affect both immediate action and long-term character arcs. This grounded approach ensures that the fantasy elements never overshadow the human drama at the story's core. Action sequences in this act are intricately choreographed, designed to serve narrative progression rather than mere spectacle. For instance, a battle atop a jagged cliff involves not just swordplay, but tactical thinking, environmental awareness, and moral choices that influence subsequent plot developments. The sequence visually reinforces thematic contrasts, the harsh, unyielding ice of Freya's domain against the resilience and resourcefulness of the Huntsman and his companions. These moments emphasize that action in Winter's War functions as storytelling rather than filler, a deliberate strategy that differentiates it from many contemporaneous fantasy films. Romantic and emotional subplots are also subtly integrated, providing depth without detracting from the central narrative. The Huntsman's past romantic entanglements are revisited, illustrating how love, loss, and loyalty intertwine with broader conflicts. These threads are handled with restraint, avoiding melodrama while highlighting the stakes of interpersonal relationships in a world dominated by political and magical tension. The narrative treats these moments as character-defining rather than plot-pacing devices, which adds authenticity and emotional resonance to the story. One of the most compelling sequences in this act involves a strategic infiltration of Freya's stronghold. The story places the Huntsman and his allies in situations where intelligence, observation, and planning are paramount. They must navigate treacherous terrain, magical obstacles, and the unpredictability of Freya's defenses. These sequences are tense not just because of immediate physical danger, but because the stakes are tied to ethical and emotional considerations. The potential loss of allies, the implications for the broader realm, and the moral responsibility inherent in their mission. The narrative ensures that tension is sustained on multiple levels simultaneously, which contributes to the film's narrative sophistication. The act deepens the exploration of Freya's psychological profile. Through interactions with her subjects, magical manifestations, and private moments of reflection, the audience gains insight into the nuances of her character. The narrative presents her not as a monolithic antagonist, but as a multi-layered figure whose decisions are informed by trauma, grief, and an unyielding need for control. These character insights elevate the story, providing intellectual and emotional engagement alongside visual spectacle. Secondary characters introduced in this act are strategically designed to reflect thematic concerns. Each character, whether ally or adversary, serves as a foil, emphasizing particular traits of the Huntsman or Freya, and reinforcing narrative themes of loyalty, power, and moral ambiguity. The story avoids extraneous characters, ensuring that every introduction contributes to plot development, world building, or thematic resonance. This disciplined narrative focus helps maintain clarity in a complex, multi-threaded story. The act also explores the consequences of past actions. The Huntsman's previous decisions, particularly involving Ravenna and other central characters, influence current dynamics. Allies and enemies alike respond to historical events, creating ripple effects that drive tension and shape conflict resolution. The story emphasizes causality and accountability, which distinguishes it from fantasy narratives that often overlook the long-term consequences of character choices. Magic, action, and emotional resonance intersect most dramatically in a climactic mid-act sequence. Freya's ice constructs become increasingly perilous, forcing the Huntsman to reconcile tactical ingenuity with moral responsibility. Allies are placed in jeopardy, ethical dilemmas intensify, and the narrative stakes escalate organically. This sequence is emblematic of the film's approach. Spectacle and narrative depth are integrated rather than compartmentalized. Visual effects, choreography, and character development are inextricably linked, ensuring that audience engagement remains both visceral and intellectual. Political intrigue continues to unfold, revealing the broader ramifications of Freya's rule. Alliances shift, secret agendas emerge, and characters must navigate complex social landscapes in addition to physical danger. These developments are embedded in the story without slowing pacing, illustrating a careful balance between plot complexity and narrative momentum. The world building is robust, kingdoms feel alive, societal structures appear functional, and consequences of leadership decisions are tangible. As the story moves into the final portion of this act, tension reaches a sustained peak, with the narrative threading together the multiple character arcs and thematic strands established earlier. The Huntsman, having navigated treacherous terrain and tested loyalties, begins to confront the emotional weight of past losses alongside the immediate stakes of Freya's dominion. The narrative emphasizes that heroism in this world is rarely about simple triumph. It is about decision-making under extreme moral and physical pressure. Hemsworth's performance in these sequences is nuanced. His character exhibits moments of vulnerability and doubt, making him relatable even amid larger-than-life circumstances. Freya's icy kingdom becomes almost a character in itself during this segment. The narrative uses environmental storytelling to reflect her internal state. Frozen landscapes, towering glaciers, and snow-laden forests mirror the rigidity and isolation of her psyche. The act frequently juxtaposes these cold expanses against warm, vibrant flashes of memory or brief moments of human connection, creating a visual and thematic contrast that underscores the story's exploration of love versus duty, grief versus control. Every battle, every confrontation with magic, and every strategic maneuver takes on both literal and symbolic weight. A particularly compelling sequence involves a confrontation between the Huntsman and Freya, where the line between physical conflict and emotional tension blurs. Their interaction is loaded with subtext. The audience can feel the history between them in every glance, pause, and word. Freya's icy demeanor masks her vulnerability, and the Huntsman's stoicism conceals his empathy and inner conflict. The writing in this scene is intelligent, relying on implication and expression rather than exposition-heavy dialogue, which keeps the tension palpable and the stakes authentic. Jessica Chastain's Red Queen continues to influence events through indirect means. Flashbacks reveal key choices she made in her reign, the strategies she employed, and the psychological imprints she left on her sister and the broader political landscape. These sequences are integrated seamlessly, providing context for present events without slowing the narrative pace. They enrich the story by illustrating how history, memory, and legacy shape character motivations and conflicts, creating a continuity that rewards attentive viewers. The narrative introduces additional magical elements, such as enchanted forests, mystical creatures, and illusions created by Freya's ice magic, which serve both as spectacle and as narrative mechanisms to test character fortitude. For instance, one sequence involves the Huntsman and his allies navigating a forest where trees shift positions, creating a maze-like challenge. The scene is thrilling visually, but its narrative significance lies in the character's resilience, problem-solving abilities, and interpersonal trust. Magic in this act is always a tool to reveal character and advance the story, rather than an arbitrary obstacle. Alliances are tested as the Huntsman works to counter Freya's dominance. Certain characters who initially appear loyal or neutral reveal hidden motives, forcing recalibration and strategic adaptation. The story emphasizes that trust in this world is provisional, and that personal and political motives often collide in unpredictable ways. This narrative complexity strengthens the stakes, as every encounter carries the possibility of betrayal, compromise, or moral dilemma, keeping the audience engaged on multiple levels simultaneously. Romantic and emotional subplots reach pivotal moments in this portion of the story. The Huntsman's past relationships and unresolved attachments influence current choices, particularly when confronted with ethical decisions that require balancing personal attachment against collective welfare. These threads are interwoven subtly, ensuring they enhance the narrative rather than distract from it. Emotional resonance is achieved through restraint and focus on authentic human reaction, reinforcing the film's emphasis on character-driven stakes. A key turning point involves a direct confrontation with Freya's magical forces in an environment designed to amplify danger and tension. The narrative employs verticality, treacherous footing, and shifting ice formations to heighten suspense, while simultaneously reinforcing thematic motifs of instability, isolation, and control. Characters must make split-second decisions, and every outcome is treated with narrative gravity. The story does not rely on contrived survival, but rather on strategic thinking, courage, and emotional insight. This act also deepens the exploration of Freya's psychological profile. Moments of private reflection, subtle interactions with her subordinates, and manifestations of grief and longing provide the audience with a holistic view of her character. The narrative avoids caricature, portraying her as a multi-dimensional figure whose ruthlessness is inseparable from her vulnerability and the trauma that shaped her. By humanizing the antagonist, the story creates a morally rich landscape, where conflicts are not purely external, but also deeply internal. Secondary characters introduced earlier in the story continue to serve as mirrors for central figures. Their choices highlight different aspects of the Huntsman's morality, Freya's strategy, and the consequences of unchecked ambition. Each supporting character is given narrative space to demonstrate growth, loyalty, or internal conflict, ensuring that the story feels populated and alive, rather than focused solely on the leads. The screenplay's attention to these dynamics reinforces the sense of a fully realized world. The act also sets up the climactic convergence of multiple storylines. The narrative begins to intersect Freya's ambitions, the Huntsman's objectives, and unresolved tensions from the Red Queen's legacy. These intersections are carefully constructed so that each character's decisions have tangible consequences, both emotionally and materially, in the unfolding story. The audience is primed for high-stakes conflict without needing artificial cliffhangers, as tension is naturally embedded in the interplay of character motivations, magical dynamics, and political pressures. Visual storytelling continues to play a central role. Ice, snow, and winter landscapes are not mere backdrops. They function symbolically and narratively. Shattered ice mirrors fractured alliances, blizzards signify confusion or disorientation, and crystalline structures reflect the elegance and danger of Freya's dominion. The cinematography consistently reinforces thematic concerns, integrating visual motifs with character development and plot progression. Each environment communicates narrative information without relying on expository dialogue. Magic and environment collide in the penultimate sequences of this act, creating both spectacular visual moments and narrative tension. Illusions, environmental hazards, and enchanted constructs are used to challenge the Huntsman and his allies, but they also serve as a means to explore themes of trust, perception, and moral decision-making. Every challenge has layered implications. Characters must assess both immediate danger and the ethical consequences of their choices. The integration of these elements demonstrates careful planning by the filmmakers, ensuring that fantasy spectacle remains narratively purposeful. Political intrigue reaches a new dimension as the narrative exposes hidden alliances and secret motives. Kingdoms previously introduced as neutral or peripheral become active players in the story, influencing outcomes in subtle yet significant ways. This complexity grounds the fantasy world, making it feel lived in and dynamic, where decisions have ripple effects beyond the immediate narrative focus. The storytelling ensures that the audience perceives a coherent, believable web of influence and consequence. As the act concludes, the narrative heightens emotional stakes. The Huntsman's loyalty, Freya's vulnerability, and unresolved tensions from the Red Queen's era all converge, setting the stage for the climactic final sequences. Characters are forced to confront the consequences of prior decisions, the moral and emotional cost of ambition, and the necessity of courage and strategic insight. The story balances spectacle, character depth, and thematic resonance, ensuring that both visual and emotional engagement remain high as the narrative moves toward resolution. The Huntsman: Winter's War officially hit theaters on April 22, 2016, strategically positioned in the spring release calendar. This timing is significant when you consider the competitive landscape of Hollywood at that point. Spring releases are often used for films that studios believe have broad appeal, but may not have the blockbuster heft required for the late summer or holiday markets. Universal Pictures, which distributed the film, likely saw it as a way to capitalize on the residual fan base of Snow White and the Huntsman from 2012, while also positioning it to avoid direct competition with the heavy hitters of summer blockbusters like Marvel films or Batman v Superman, which was still generating post-hype. From an industry perspective, Winter's War arrived during a time when fantasy adaptations were undergoing a transition. Following the massive success of The Hunger Games and The Hobbit, studios were increasingly interested in IPs that could sustain extended universes. This film was clearly designed to serve as both a sequel and a potential franchise starter. While the first film, Snow White and the Huntsman, made a respectable box office showing, it wasn't the cultural phenomenon that studios often hope for in franchise launches. Universal's approach with Winter's War reflects a calculated risk. Lean heavily on the visually striking elements and returning cast members to attract audiences familiar with the original story, while expanding the mythos to appeal to fans of epic fantasy more generally. The production of the film itself is notable for its ambitious scope. Cedric Nicholas Troyan, primarily a visual effects supervisor before taking the director's chair, brought an aesthetic sensibility to the film that is evident in every frame. The visual effects, particularly Freya's ice magic, were designed to feel tactile and realistic, emphasizing the physicality of the environment. This is not just a stylistic choice. It speaks to the industry trend at the time where audiences increasingly expected immersive visual worlds that balanced CGI with tangible sets and stunt work. The combination of practical effects and cutting-edge VFX was part of a broader Hollywood push in the mid-2010s to make fantasy visually credible without sacrificing spectacle. Marketing for the film leaned heavily on the established star power of the returning cast. Chris Hemsworth, having solidified his status as a global action star through the Thor films and Avengers ensemble, provided a recognizable anchor. Emily Blunt brought critical acclaim and a reputation for strong, layered performances, which helped position the movie as more than just another fairy tale adaptation. Jessica Chastain's involvement added additional gravitas, signaling that the studio was investing in acting credibility as well as visual spectacle. This casting strategy aligns with industry trends at the time, where studios increasingly relied on recognizable, bankable talent to attract audiences in a crowded market. The industry context of 2016 is also relevant when considering the film's box office performance. Spring releases often face challenges from lingering interest in award season films, which dominate early year discourse, as well as the beginning of summer marketing pushes for tentpole properties. Winter's War was released alongside family-friendly animated features and a few smaller action films, which may have limited its audience penetration among core adult fantasy fans. From a business perspective, Universal was taking a calculated gamble that the combination of returning characters, visual spectacle, and thematic depth would secure a strong theatrical run despite a competitive environment. The home video and digital market for Winter's War also reflects industry trends in 2016. Studios were increasingly aware of the growing revenue potential from digital rentals and streaming services, particularly for mid-budget fantasy films. The film's release strategy likely accounted for this secondary market, anticipating that while the theatrical run might face stiff competition, long-tail digital sales could generate a sustained audience over time. This dual focus on immediate theatrical returns and extended digital revenue reflects the evolving economics of the film industry in the mid-2010s, where studios had to balance multiple revenue streams to ensure profitability. Critically, the film emerged in an environment where audiences and reviewers had heightened expectations for sequels and prequels. By 2016, cinematic literacy among viewers had evolved. Audiences expected coherent internal logic, strong character development, and world building that respected its own rules. Winter's War had to navigate these expectations while offering fresh narrative developments to justify its existence alongside the original film. This is why much of the marketing, including the trailer, focused not just on returning characters, but also on new storylines, magic systems, and political intrigue, signaling to audiences that this film would deepen rather than merely repeat the universe established previously. Financially, the production budget for Winter's War was estimated at around $115 to $125 million, reflecting the extensive visual effects work, star salaries, and on-location shoots. The film was shot in locations across the Czech Republic, Norway, and Iceland, which provided both authenticity and cinematic grandeur. These production decisions were part of a broader industry trend of seeking visually arresting international locations to enhance the fantasy experience while taking advantage of favorable tax incentives in European countries. By investing in such locations, the filmmakers ensured that the visual narrative would feel expansive and tangible, aligning with audience expectations for epic-scale fantasy worlds. Distribution strategies also reveal insight into industry practices at the time. Universal leveraged international markets heavily, anticipating that the visual spectacle and star power would resonate globally. Countries in Europe, Asia, and Latin America were major targets, especially for fantasy films with strong visual and action elements that could transcend language barriers. Marketing campaigns were tailored for regional audiences, emphasizing key sequences and characters that would have the most resonance, demonstrating the increasing sophistication of globalized film distribution in the mid-2010s. From a cultural standpoint, Winter's War also fits into the ongoing trend of strong female characters in fantasy and action cinema. Both Freya and the Red Queen are positioned as central figures whose agency drives much of the plot. The narrative gives them complex motivations, layered personalities, and substantial influence over the story's outcome, reflecting an industry shift toward creating female characters who are more than sidekicks or romantic interests. This aligns with the growing demand from audiences and critics for nuanced representation in blockbuster narratives, which, by 2016, had become a key consideration for studios attempting to appeal to both domestic and international markets. Finally, the film's release can be understood as part of a broader franchise-building strategy. While Winter's War functions as a standalone story, the narrative and thematic choices suggest that Universal was exploring the possibility of a larger universe, one where prequels, sequels, and spin-offs could all coexist. This approach was influenced by the success of Marvel, Star Wars, and The Hunger Games, demonstrating how studios in the mid-2010s increasingly sought to create interconnected cinematic worlds. By expanding character backstories, introducing new magical elements, and exploring complex interfamilial dynamics, Winter's War positioned itself as both a continuation and an expansion of a potentially enduring franchise. The casting of the Huntsman Winter's War is one of the film's strongest assets, and understanding the characters in depth is essential to appreciating the narrative's complexity. Chris Hemsworth returns as the Huntsman, and by the time this film begins, his character has evolved from the brooding, reluctant hero we first met in Snow White and the Huntsman to a more seasoned, reflective figure. Hemsworth's physicality remains crucial. He moves with the practiced grace of a trained warrior, but it's his emotional subtlety that defines this iteration. The Huntsman's actions are shaped not just by combat skill, but by memory, loyalty, and moral deliberation. This combination of external prowess and internal depth makes him more than an archetypal hero. He becomes a lens through which the audience experiences the film's moral and emotional stakes. Emily Blunt plays Freya, the Ice Queen, and her portrayal is central to the film's narrative tension. Unlike Ravenna, who is characterized by overt ambition and vanity, Freya is defined by trauma and the cold rationality it produces. Blunt's performance captures both the icy exterior and the fragile vulnerability beneath, making her a character who is frightening yet compellingly human. Freya's magic, visualized through sweeping ice formations and controlled natural phenomena, reflects her emotional state, allowing Blunt to communicate subtle shifts in her psyche through both expression and movement. The role required a blend of dramatic gravitas and action-oriented performance, which Blunt delivers seamlessly, creating a multi-dimensional antagonist whose motivations are both relatable and terrifying. Jessica Chastain reprises the Red Queen's earlier incarnation, which provides narrative depth through flashbacks and the exploration of familial dynamics. The Red Queen is more than a villain. She's a character shaped by jealousy, ambition, and trauma, and Chastain's portrayal emphasizes nuance over caricature. Her interactions, particularly with Freya, reveal underlying themes of rivalry, legacy, and the complex consequences of power. These dynamics create tension that reverberates throughout the story, influencing decisions, alliances, and betrayals, even in scenes where Chastain's character is not physically present. The Huntsman's allies include a carefully curated set of supporting characters who provide both narrative function and emotional resonance. For instance, there's the character of Sarah, a skilled warrior and strategist, whose loyalty and intellect challenge the Huntsman to act beyond brute force. She represents the moral and practical counterpoint to Hemsworth's more introspective heroism. Similarly, characters like Nyan and Griff, though less central, are important in establishing the scope of Freya's threat, and the diversity of skills and personalities necessary to challenge a ruler as formidable as the Ice Queen. These supporting roles are not filler. Each character has agency and consequences tied to the story's progression, reinforcing the film's layered world building. Ravenna, though deceased in the present timeline, continues to influence the narrative through her sister Freya and the lingering legacy she left behind. Charlize Theron does not reprise the role directly in the present-day story, but her previous portrayal informs audience expectations and contextualizes the Red Queen and Freya's psychological development. The narrative's reliance on Ravenna as an absent yet influential figure demonstrates how casting decisions and character legacies can extend beyond screen time, shaping plot and emotional tension. Freya's soldiers, often referred to as ice warriors, function almost as extensions of her character. These individuals, trained to absolute precision, reflect her values of order, control, and discipline. Their casting required actors capable of both martial skill and subtle performance, conveying loyalty, fear, or resistance as the narrative demanded. The film's attention to these secondary characters underscores the filmmaker's commitment to a realistic, internally consistent world, where even minor players contribute to thematic and narrative weight. The film also includes fantastical creatures and magical entities, brought to life through a combination of CGI, motion capture, and practical effects. While these are not actors in the traditional sense, their characterization is essential for audience immersion. The creature's behavior, movement, and interaction with human characters required careful direction to ensure they enhanced both spectacle and story. Their presence reinforces the narrative's commitment to world building and emphasizes the high stakes of Freya's icy dominion. The Huntsman's internal circle is not immune to tension, and casting choices reflect the need to communicate subtle interpersonal dynamics. The actors portraying allies and confidants must convey trust, skepticism, loyalty, or rivalry through nuanced performances, often in dialogue-light sequences. These casting decisions are crucial because the audience must intuit the history and emotional stakes among characters, making subtle facial expressions, body language, and timing vital to understanding narrative progression. The film also employs a deliberate mix of international talent to broaden its appeal. Shooting across Europe with actors from multiple countries allows for a diverse representation of characters, while benefiting from regional talent with strong theatrical and cinematic backgrounds. This diversity enriches both performance quality and visual authenticity, enhancing the sense of a lived-in world. Makeup, costume, and character design play a key role in reinforcing each actor's narrative and thematic function. Freya's costume, for example, communicates both elegance and menace, reflecting the precision and coldness of her rule. The Huntsman's armor and attire emphasize utility and pragmatism, supporting his image as a seasoned warrior whose experience outweighs flamboyance. The Red Queen's elaborate ensembles signify both power and vanity, visually communicating psychological and thematic traits without explicit dialogue. Costume choices complement casting by providing visual shorthand for character values, emotional states, and narrative roles. The ensemble cast's chemistry is integral to the story's believability. Scenes involving strategic planning, confrontation, or emotional reflection rely on actors' ability to respond organically to each other's performance. Hemsworth's Huntsman must react believably to Blunt's Freya and Chastain's Red Queen, balancing authority, caution, and emotional undercurrents. This interplay ensures that character interactions feel authentic, even amidst the fantastical and often highly stylized action sequences. The casting of villains in particular reflects a conscious effort to create multifaceted antagonists. Freya and the Red Queen are not evil for its own sake. Their motivations are deeply personal, rooted in grief, envy, and ambition. Blunt and Chastain's portrayals anchor these motivations in believable human emotion, giving the audience characters they can fear, empathize with, and intellectually engage with simultaneously. This level of sophistication in casting distinguishes the film from standard fantasy fare, emphasizing narrative depth alongside visual spectacle. Finally, casting decisions in Winter's War reflect broader industry trends. Mid-2010s Hollywood was increasingly investing in strong ensemble casts, particularly for franchise potential, recognizing that compelling characters are essential to long-term audience investment. By pairing established stars with talented supporting actors and carefully crafted secondary characters, the film seeks to create a narrative ecosystem where every role contributes meaningfully to plot, theme, and audience engagement. This approach underscores the importance of casting not just for marketability, but for the narrative integrity of a fantasy world, seeking to be both immersive and emotionally resonant. At its core, The Huntsman Winter's War is an epic tale of loyalty, vengeance, and the complex interplay between power and personal morality. From the very beginning, the story signals that it intends to balance high-stakes fantasy spectacle with intimate human drama. Without delving into plot specifics that would spoil twists or climactic revelations, the film's structure is designed to explore the consequences of past actions, while introducing new conflicts that test characters on multiple levels: physical, emotional, and ethical. The overarching plot revolves around the dynamic tension between Freya, the Ice Queen, and the Huntsman, whose moral compass and physical skill position him as both a protagonist and a reflective observer of the unfolding events. The story establishes early on that the central conflict is not simply about good versus evil in a conventional sense. Instead, it examines the nuanced motivations that drive both hero and antagonist. Freya's decisions, for instance, are heavily influenced by grief and trauma, giving her actions a dimension of human complexity that elevates the narrative above the stereotypical fantasy villain. A key aspect of the plot involves the exploration of familial bonds, legacy, and memory. The story frequently references events and decisions from the past, which have ramifications in the present. These narrative threads create a sense of continuity with the original film, while also allowing new viewers to understand the stakes without prior knowledge. The interplay between history and present events highlights the film's interest in character-driven storytelling, emphasizing that the past shapes not only personal motivations, but also political and magical landscapes. The narrative introduces multiple conflicts simultaneously, skillfully interweaving them to maintain tension and engagement. There's the immediate threat posed by Freya's ice magic and her armies, which manifests through visually stunning sequences of environmental manipulation and combat. Simultaneously, the Huntsman navigates ethical dilemmas, strategic choices, and complex interpersonal dynamics with allies and adversaries alike. These overlapping layers of conflict ensure that the story never feels static. Even quieter, dialogue-driven moments carry the weight of underlying stakes. Romantic and emotional subplots are present, but handled with restraint, complementing rather than distracting from the central narrative. These elements provide additional motivation for characters' decisions and deepen audience investment in outcomes. The story emphasizes that emotional resonance can coexist with large-scale fantasy spectacle, using character relationships to heighten tension in key sequences and to humanize moments of conflict. Magic in the film is a central storytelling tool, and the plot leverages it in a way that integrates seamlessly with character development and thematic exploration. Freya's abilities extend beyond brute force. Her magic manipulates perception, tests loyalty, and creates moral dilemmas for the protagonists. This integration ensures that magical spectacle is narratively meaningful, rather than purely decorative. Each use of magic has consequences that ripple through the plot, reinforcing the stakes for both heroes and villains. The story also explores the consequences of power and leadership. Characters in positions of authority, including Freya, must navigate the delicate balance between personal desire, ethical responsibility, and the welfare of those they rule. These thematic explorations elevate the plot, allowing the film to operate on multiple levels simultaneously, entertaining as a fantasy adventure, while also offering reflective commentary on morality, leadership, and human nature. While the plot features large-scale battles and high-stakes confrontations, it is structured to maintain clarity and accessibility. Action sequences are carefully choreographed to serve narrative purposes, advancing character arcs and plot developments rather than existing solely for visual spectacle. This approach ensures that the audience remains emotionally invested in outcomes, rather than being distracted by action for its own sake. The narrative is also notable for its exploration of trust and loyalty. Characters must constantly evaluate who can be relied upon and who may have hidden agendas. These dynamics create suspense and keep the audience engaged, as alliances are never entirely predictable and decisions have tangible consequences. This emphasis on relational tension adds depth to the plot and enriches the world building, making the stakes feel both personal and universal. A defining feature of the plot is its thematic consistency. Whether through visual cues, character interactions, or the use of magic, the story maintains a coherent exploration of central themes. The intersection of grief and power, the consequences of ambition, and the enduring significance of loyalty and moral integrity. These themes are consistently reinforced through narrative developments, ensuring that the story resonates beyond surface-level spectacle. The pacing of the film is designed to balance exposition, character development, and action. Early sequences establish context and emotional stakes. Mid-story sequences deepen character relationships and introduce layered conflict. And later sequences escalate tension toward climactic resolutions. This careful pacing prevents the story from feeling rushed or uneven, allowing audiences to absorb both the narrative and the world building at a natural rhythm. Importantly, the plot accommodates both returning viewers and newcomers. While prior knowledge of Snow White and the Huntsman enhances understanding of character history and relational dynamics, the story is constructed to provide sufficient context for new viewers. Flashbacks, visual storytelling, and strategically placed exposition enable audiences to comprehend motivations and stakes without overwhelming the narrative with redundant explanation. The story also emphasizes spatial and environmental storytelling. Settings, ranging from frozen landscapes to magical fortresses, are not merely backdrops but active components of the narrative. Environments reflect character psychology, thematic resonance, and narrative tension. For example, icy terrain symbolize both the literal and metaphorical coldness of Freya's rule, while contrasting warm or vibrant locations underscore moments of human connection and moral clarity. These design choices enhance plot immersion and provide subtle narrative cues to audiences. Another critical element of the plot is the interplay between action and strategy. Conflicts are not resolved solely through brute force. Characters must think tactically, anticipate adversaries' moves, and weigh the consequences of their actions. This emphasis on intelligent decision-making heightens engagement, as audiences are invited to follow characters' reasoning and speculate on outcomes. It also reinforces the story's commitment to character-driven plot mechanics, rather than relying on external spectacle alone. Finally, the narrative achieves a balance between resolution and openness. While central conflicts are addressed by the film's conclusion, the story leaves certain thematic threads and character arcs open to interpretation, reflecting the complexity of relationships, power, and moral choice. This narrative choice aligns with contemporary fantasy trends, where audiences expect both satisfying closure and nuanced ambiguity that prompts reflection and discussion. Overall, the plot of The Huntsman Winter's War is a meticulously crafted blend of character-driven drama, moral tension, magical spectacle, and visual storytelling. It maintains narrative clarity while exploring complex themes, ensuring that the film operates as both an engaging fantasy adventure and a reflection on human motivation, loyalty, and the consequences of power. By balancing spectacle with substance, it positions itself as a thoughtful continuation of its predecessor, while also appealing to a broad audience seeking both emotional depth and cinematic excitement. Watching The Huntsman Winter's War as a contemporary fantasy film, you immediately notice the tension between ambition and execution. On one hand, the movie has everything it needs to captivate: a stellar cast, expansive visual design, and a mythos that expands on the original Snow White and the Huntsman. On the other hand, it sometimes struggles to balance character depth with narrative momentum. But if we strip it down, the film demonstrates both strengths that stand out and weaknesses that feel like missed opportunities, and analyzing them closely provides insight into both the story and the industry mechanics behind it. Starting with the positives, the performances are uniformly compelling. Chris Hemsworth brings the Huntsman a gravitas that goes beyond physical heroics. He's believable as a man shaped by grief and loyalty, and Hemsworth allows us to feel the weight of his decisions, even in high-octane action sequences. His physicality never overshadows emotional nuance. Instead, it complements it. Emily Blunt as Freya is the highlight of the film. She embodies a regal, icy menace while subtly revealing vulnerability. The scenes where Freya's grief surfaces through restrained expression or fleeting softness in posture are some of the most emotionally resonant moments in the movie. Jessica Chastain's Red Queen, though less present in the present timeline, continues to haunt the narrative through both flashbacks and legacy, and Chastain ensures that the character's presence is felt even off-screen. Visually, the film excels. Cedric Nicholas Troyan's background in visual effects is evident everywhere. From sweeping panoramic shots of snowy mountains to intricate ice constructs that challenge both the heroes and the audience's expectations of magical realism. There's a tactile quality to the ice magic that makes the environment feel both majestic and threatening. The cinematography, costume design, and production design work together seamlessly, creating a visually coherent world that immerses the viewer. Costumes particularly reflect character psychology. Freya's structured, elegant attire reinforces her rigid control. The Huntsman's utilitarian garb underscores his grounded, pragmatic nature. And the Red Queen's opulent ensembles communicate authority and vanity. These visual cues enhance storytelling subtly but powerfully. Action sequences are choreographed with care. Unlike many contemporary fantasy films that rely purely on spectacle, Winter's War integrates combat with strategy and character motivation. A chase across icy cliffs isn't just thrilling visually, it tests characters' agility, intelligence, and moral courage. The consequences of each move are meaningful, keeping viewers invested beyond the surface excitement. It's not simply a showcase of CGI. The action sequences serve narrative and emotional purposes, a distinction that elevates the film. However, the movie is not without flaws. The pacing occasionally stumbles, particularly in sequences that attempt to juggle multiple storylines or flashbacks. While the complexity is narratively justified, it sometimes results in confusion or a momentary disconnect from the emotional through line. Certain secondary characters, while well cast, do not always receive sufficient development to make their choices feel impactful, which slightly undercuts the stakes. These moments highlight a tension between narrative ambition and runtime constraints. At roughly 2 hours, the film must cover a lot of emotional and thematic territory, and some threads inevitably receive less attention than others. From a storytelling perspective, Winter's War succeeds in presenting morally complex characters. Freya, in particular, avoids being a stereotypical villain. Her ruthlessness is balanced by grief, and her decisions, while extreme, are understandable within her context. This moral nuance extends to the Huntsman, whose heroism is complicated by past trauma and ethical dilemmas. The narrative encourages viewers to consider the cost of power and the nature of loyalty, rather than simplifying conflict into black and white terms. These choices demonstrate an ambition uncommon in mid-tier fantasy sequels, where storytelling often defaults to straightforward good versus evil dynamics. The film's thematic depth is complemented by its emotional resonance. Scenes exploring grief, love, and loss are integrated organically with plot developments, rather than feeling inserted as emotional checkpoints. The filmmakers clearly intend for viewers to engage both intellectually and emotionally, allowing the stakes to feel personal, even amidst the grandeur of fantasy warfare. Emotional stakes, in combination with the physical and magical stakes, give the film a layered texture that can sustain long-form viewing. On the technical side, sound design and score enhance immersion significantly. The orchestral score underlines tension, romance, and wonder without overshadowing performances. Sound cues in action sequences, such as the cracking of ice or the whoosh of magic, reinforce the tactile realism of the fantasy world. These elements combine to produce a sensory experience that is polished and intentional, reflecting careful collaboration between director, composer, and sound designers. Yet, some narrative choices may divide audiences. The film relies on audience familiarity with the original Snow White and the Huntsman, particularly regarding character history and relationships. While Winter's War does provide context for new viewers, subtle nuances, emotional weight, and character arcs resonate more strongly if the viewer has prior knowledge. In that sense, the film is a hybrid between standalone adventure and sequel-driven continuity. It attempts to be accessible, but rewards investment in the original story. Another challenge arises in the balancing of spectacle and storytelling. While visual effects are superb, there are moments where the grandeur of the environment and magical elements could overshadow character-driven tension. However, the filmmakers largely mitigate this risk by grounding sequences in personal stakes, showing us who is at risk, how decisions affect relationships, and what the moral cost of action will be. In other words, spectacle and narrative are mostly integrated, even if occasionally the scale threatens to overwhelm intimacy. Audience reception is another layer worth considering. Critics noted the film's visual polish and strong performances, but were mixed on pacing and narrative focus. Box office performance reflected this duality. While the film was visually and thematically ambitious, it struggled to resonate broadly in a competitive spring release window dominated by superhero films and animated features. From a critical standpoint, it's a case study in balancing narrative ambition with mainstream appeal. The movie aims high, and while it doesn't achieve perfection, the intention is evident and often succeeds in creating memorable moments. Ultimately, The Huntsman, Winter's War is a film that asks viewers to engage on multiple levels: intellectually, emotionally, and viscerally. It combines fantasy spectacle with character-driven drama, offering both visual awe and thoughtful exploration of grief, loyalty, and power. While the pacing and secondary character development occasionally falter, the lead's performances, the thematic richness, and the technical craftsmanship elevate the film. It's a reminder that fantasy cinema can aim to be both entertaining and emotionally resonant, and that careful casting, visual storytelling, and moral complexity can make a sequel stand on its own while honoring its predecessor. The honest takeaway is this: the film is not flawless, and it will polarize audiences depending on expectations for pacing, narrative focus, and spectacle. However, for viewers who appreciate nuanced characters, integrated visual effects, and thematic ambition in a fantasy setting, Winter's War delivers memorable, high-quality cinematic moments that stand out in the 2016 fantasy landscape. It's a thoughtful, layered adventure that rewards attentive viewers with depth and spectacle in equal measure. One of the first things worth noting about The Huntsman, Winter's War is the degree of thought put into world building and continuity with its predecessor. While the film operates as a prequel-sequel hybrid, many subtle details are included to reward attentive viewers. For example, small costume design cues, such as the pattern of Ravenna's armor or the embroidery on Freya's robes, mirror textures and motifs from the first film, creating a visual continuity that enhances immersion. These details aren't purely decorative. They subtly reinforce the narrative by visually connecting characters' histories to their current identities. The film also employs symbolic elements that might go unnoticed on a casual viewing. Ice, as a recurring motif, represents both control and isolation. Freya's kingdom isn't just cold in temperature, it's psychologically and emotionally frigid. Every frozen structure, from her castle spires to the enchanted forests, serves to externalize her grief and rigidity. In contrast, warmer or more natural environments in the film, like the Huntsman's hiding places or allied camps, underscore safety, human connection, and moral clarity. This visual dichotomy enhances storytelling, communicating theme without the need for exposition. Another hidden layer comes from the use of magical artifacts. The narrative includes items that carry both historical significance and plot utility. For example, certain relics introduced in Freya's past are referenced subtly in present events, creating a sense of continuity and foreshadowing. These details may escape casual viewers, but enrich the mythology of the universe, adding a sense of lived-in history that makes the fantasy world more credible. The casting itself carries hidden significance. Hemsworth, Blunt, and Chastain all bring prior genre experience that informs their performances. Hemsworth's experience in superhero cinema allows him to deliver action sequences with authenticity, while Blunt's work in psychologically complex roles adds layers to Freya's characterization. Chastain's dramatic background ensures that the Red Queen remains an enduring presence, even when physically absent. The casting choices reflect an intentional strategy to blend star power with character depth, enhancing both marketability and narrative richness. Visual effects are another area full of hidden detail. Many of Freya's ice creations were designed to behave in physically consistent ways, such as cracking under pressure, reflecting light differently depending on angle, or interacting with characters' movements realistically. These are not incidental. They represent a conscious effort by the visual effects team to make magic feel tangible. This attention to detail reinforces the believability of the world and makes action sequences more immersive because every magical interaction obeys its own internal logic. Easter eggs tied to the original Snow White and the Huntsman are also scattered throughout the film. Small visual callbacks like insignias, locations, and character behaviors reward fans familiar with the original. These touches are never distracting. They're designed as subtle nods that deepen appreciation for the broader story universe. The film also integrates subtle foreshadowing through dialogue and visual cues. Certain lines spoken by Freya or the Huntsman hint at character arcs that unfold later in the narrative. Similarly, background elements like a particular frozen sculpture or a painting in a castle hall anticipate future plot developments. These narrative devices enrich the viewing experience for audiences who pay attention to detail, creating layers of anticipation and engagement that encourage repeat viewings. Environmental storytelling plays a particularly important role. Locations are carefully chosen to reflect both character and theme. The starkness of Freya's ice fortress contrasts with the organic layouts of her adversaries' bases, communicating power dynamics visually. Furthermore, environmental hazards, such as unstable ice bridges, avalanches, or enchanted traps, serve dual purposes. They advance plot tension while reinforcing character skills, resourcefulness, and moral decision-making under pressure. Music and sound design also contain hidden narrative elements. The score, composed to accentuate tension and emotion, uses recurring motifs to represent particular characters or themes. For instance, certain string arrangements underscore Freya's emotional fragility, while low brass motifs accompany scenes of her authority and aggression. The auditory cues are subtle, yet they help the audience unconsciously interpret character motivation and narrative tone. The film's pre-production and shooting choices reveal additional layers of detail. Many sequences were filmed on practical locations in Iceland, Norway, and the Czech Republic to capture authentic environmental textures. Snow, ice formations, and natural landscapes were used in conjunction with CGI to maintain visual realism. This hybrid approach not only enhances immersion, but also supports thematic storytelling, emphasizing the cold, unforgiving nature of Freya's world, while contrasting with warmer, human-centered spaces. One of the cleverest hidden elements is the symbolic use of familial relationships. Freya's interactions with her sister, though occasionally revealed through flashbacks, resonate throughout the story. Their past decisions influence current motivations, conflicts, and alliances. This attention to generational influence, rivalry, and trauma is rarely foregrounded explicitly, but it enriches the narrative's moral and emotional complexity. Even minor characters carry subtle narrative weight. Certain secondary soldiers, advisors, or mystical entities are designed with consistent behaviors, personalities, and loyalties, reinforcing the internal logic of Freya's kingdom. Their appearances and choices are intentional, contributing to plot progression and reinforcing the idea that every character in the world, no matter how small, affects the larger story ecosystem. The cinematography includes careful framing that reinforces character psychology. Close-ups, wide-angle shots, and perspective manipulation are used to underscore isolation, vulnerability, or dominance. For instance, Freya is often framed in vast, empty, icy landscapes to visually communicate her loneliness and psychological control. Conversely, the Huntsman is often framed alongside allies or within dynamic environments to emphasize collaboration, resilience, and grounded heroism. Finally, thematic subtext runs throughout the film. Concepts such as power as a burden, grief as a motivator, and loyalty versus personal morality are embedded not just in dialogue, but in visual composition, character action, and magical rules. These subtleties encourage audiences to engage critically with the story, rewarding attentive viewing and reflection. By embedding these layered details, the filmmakers create a richer, more immersive experience that elevates the film beyond standard fantasy action. In sum, The Huntsman Winter's War contains numerous hidden details, visual, auditory, narrative, and thematic, that reward careful attention. Costume motifs, environmental storytelling, character behavior, subtle dialogue cues, and symbolic use of magic all contribute to a densely layered cinematic experience. These elements showcase a deliberate, high-effort approach to storytelling, demonstrating the filmmaker's commitment to both spectacle and meaningful narrative depth. When considering why The Huntsman Winter's War has blockbuster potential, the first factor that comes to mind is the combination of star power, visual spectacle, and narrative ambition. Chris Hemsworth, Emily Blunt, and Jessica Chastain are not only talented actors, but also globally recognized names capable of drawing diverse audiences. Hemsworth's appeal spans both superhero fans and action aficionados. Blunt brings critical acclaim and credibility, while Chastain adds dramatic gravitas. This trifecta ensures that audiences are intrigued not just by the fantasy elements, but by the performances themselves, a critical factor in attracting repeat viewership and international appeal. The film's visual effects are another pillar of its blockbuster potential. In the mid-2010s, audiences had developed a refined expectation for immersive, high-quality VFX, and Winter's War delivers on that front. The ice magic sequences are both intricate and cinematic, offering breathtaking visuals that can easily be leveraged in trailers, posters, and social media marketing. Spectacle, when combined with a coherent story and character-driven stakes, ensures that the film can compete in a crowded market dominated by superhero franchises and large-scale fantasy epics. From a narrative standpoint, the film leverages both prequel and sequel storytelling techniques, creating a universe that is both familiar and expanded. Returning audiences are rewarded with connections to the original Snow White and the Huntsman, while new viewers are provided context that makes the story accessible. This dual approach maximizes potential reach. It caters to established fans of the franchise, while also targeting a broader audience seeking epic fantasy adventures with standalone appeal. Thematically, the film resonates with contemporary audience sensibilities. Characters like Freya and the Red Queen are morally complex, emotionally rich, and visually iconic. The emphasis on female agency, power dynamics, and moral ambiguity reflects an industry trend toward nuanced storytelling, which has proven commercially and critically appealing. Audiences are drawn to layered characters, particularly in a fantasy context where archetypes are common. Offering villains with depth creates memorable, conversation-worthy moments that contribute to word-of-mouth marketing and brand longevity. The setting and production design also support blockbuster potential. Filming across Iceland, Norway, and the Czech Republic ensures visually diverse and breathtaking locations that translate into high-impact cinematography. Snow-capped mountains, crystalline ice formations, and expansive magical landscapes provide the kind of large-scale visual canvas that commands attention in theaters. In an era where visual spectacle can be a primary draw, these environments are a major asset, particularly when paired with high-definition projection and immersive sound design. Action choreography is a third contributing factor. The film integrates strategic combat, environmental hazards, and magical confrontations in ways that emphasize character skill and narrative consequence. Audiences respond to action that is not only visually thrilling, but also meaningful within the story. By making action sequences serve character arcs and thematic stakes, the film distinguishes itself from more superficial, spectacle-driven blockbusters. Fans are more likely to invest emotionally and recommend the movie if they perceive stakes that matter. Marketing strategy further enhances blockbuster potential. The film's trailers, posters, and promotional campaigns highlight the strengths audiences respond to most: Hemsworth's heroism, Blunt's icy authority, and Chastain's commanding presence. Teasing magical confrontations, high-stakes battles, and visually striking environments generates excitement without revealing critical plot points, maintaining intrigue. This type of marketing, which balances spectacle, character, and mystery, aligns with industry best practices for fantasy tentpoles and maximizes anticipation. The story's moral and emotional complexity is another factor that can drive audience engagement and longevity. Themes of loyalty, grief, and ethical decision-making elevate the narrative beyond typical fairy tale action, allowing for emotional resonance across multiple demographic groups. Families, young adults, and fans of fantasy all find points of connection within these universal themes. This accessibility broadens potential audience size and encourages repeat viewership, which is critical for box office success. Franchise building potential is embedded within the film. By expanding the lore established in Snow White and the Huntsman, introducing new characters, and exploring familial and political dynamics, the movie sets the stage for sequels, prequels, and spin-offs. Studios increasingly prioritize IPs that can generate long-term engagement and cross-media opportunities, including merchandising, streaming spin-offs, and video games. Winter's War is structured to accommodate these possibilities without compromising the integrity of the standalone story. Global appeal is another strength. The universality of fantasy, combined with the visual language of ice magic and epic landscapes, transcends language barriers. International audiences are drawn to spectacle and clear emotional storytelling, both of which this film delivers. Strategic casting and location choices enhance this global resonance, making the film well-suited for strong overseas box office performance. Finally, the film's balance of spectacle and substance is perhaps its most important asset. Many modern blockbusters excel in one dimension, but falter in the other. Winter's War combines high-quality visual effects, memorable action sequences, and immersive world-building with emotional and moral stakes, character-driven conflict, and narrative depth. This equilibrium allows the film to appeal to both casual viewers seeking entertainment and discerning audiences seeking meaningful storytelling, significantly enhancing its potential as a blockbuster. In conclusion, The Huntsman: Winter's War has the components necessary to thrive as a blockbuster. Recognizable and capable star power, visually stunning environments, integrated action and magic, emotionally resonant themes, and franchise-building potential. Its combination of spectacle, narrative ambition, and thematic depth positions it not just as a visually impressive fantasy film, but as a cinematic experience that can attract diverse audiences globally, sustain interest over time, and serve as a foundation for extended storytelling. The elements are all present. It's a film designed to deliver excitement, depth, and visual wonder simultaneously. A formula that, when executed effectively, is the hallmark of a true blockbuster. As we bring this deep dive to a close, it's worth reflecting on what The Huntsman: Winter's War ultimately represents in modern fantasy cinema. Beyond its dazzling visual effects, elaborate costumes, and thrilling action, the film is a meditation on human emotion under extraordinary circumstances. At its heart, it asks questions about grief, loyalty, and the consequences of wielding power, giving viewers something to contemplate even as they are swept along by the spectacle. The grandeur of Freya's ice-laden kingdom isn't just a backdrop, it's a manifestation of internal emotional states, turning landscape into storytelling device and making the environment a character in its own right. The emotional resonance is amplified by the film's emphasis on relationships, particularly those shaped by loss and ambition. The huntsman's sense of duty, Freya's cold detachment driven by trauma, and the Red Queen's lingering influence illustrate a thematic web where past actions continuously inform present choices. These narrative threads underscore that the stakes are not just political or magical, they're profoundly human. In this way, the film succeeds where many fantasy films falter. It invests in character-driven storytelling without losing the epic scale and visual thrill that define the genre. Cinematically, the film also pushes boundaries in terms of visual storytelling. The integration of practical effects with CGI results in sequences that feel tactile and immersive, from the crackle of ice underfoot to the shimmer of frozen magic in motion. These details may go unnoticed in casual viewing, but they're indicative of the high level of craftsmanship at work. Each frame, from sweeping landscape shots to intimate close-ups, is designed to communicate tone, emotion, and narrative progression simultaneously. It's this careful layering of cinematic technique that gives Winter's War the potential to stand out in a crowded market. Thematically, the film balances light and darkness, both literally and metaphorically. Scenes of icy desolation contrast with moments of warmth, trust, and human connection, creating a rhythm that keeps the audience engaged and emotionally invested. This interplay ensures that while the stakes are fantastical, they are also relatable. Viewers are drawn into moral dilemmas and emotional conflicts, which adds depth to action sequences and heightens the impact of climactic moments. It's not just a spectacle. It's a reflection of the human experience through the lens of fantasy. From a narrative perspective, the film's strength lies in its layered approach. The story doesn't rely solely on external conflict. It intertwines internal struggles with battles against formidable external forces. Characters are constantly tested, not just physically, but psychologically, creating multi-dimensional arcs that resonate beyond the film's runtime. By exploring themes of choice, consequence, and redemption, the movie gives viewers more than a simple adventure. It provides a story that lingers in memory and encourages reflection on loyalty, morality, and the nature of power. The visual motifs, ice, cold, and expansive landscapes, also function symbolically. They reinforce character psychology, elevate thematic resonance, and create an aesthetic that is immediately recognizable. These motifs aren't simply decorative. They communicate story beats, highlight emotional stakes, and serve as visual metaphors for isolation, control, and the consequences of unchecked ambition. This attention to detail reflects a deliberate directorial vision and a commitment to making every cinematic element contribute to narrative depth. The film's action sequences deserve one more note in the outro, because they exemplify a balance often missing in modern fantasy cinema. Here, action is not spectacle for spectacle's sake. It is motivated, strategically structured, and intimately tied to character development. Each confrontation reveals aspects of skill, strategy, and morality, allowing viewers to engage cognitively as well as emotionally. The combination of choreography, environment, and magic enhances believability and makes each encounter more satisfying than a typical CGI-driven spectacle. Ultimately, The Huntsman: Winter's War works because it marries scale with subtlety. It's a film that invites viewers to marvel at its visual accomplishments, while also engaging with its layered storytelling. The interplay of character, theme, and environment creates a rich cinematic tapestry that rewards attentive viewing. And the careful balance of spectacle and narrative depth positions it as a standout within mid-2010s fantasy cinema. The final takeaway is that this movie is about more than ice kingdoms, magic, and sword fights. It's about the emotional truth beneath the spectacle. It explores the human consequences of power, the complexities of loyalty, and the enduring impact of past choices. By weaving together high-stakes fantasy with intimate emotional storytelling, Winter's War leaves a lasting impression, offering both entertainment and resonance. In many ways, it exemplifies the potential of modern fantasy cinema to be ambitious, emotionally engaging, and visually unforgettable, all at the same time. If you've stayed with me through this in-depth exploration of The Huntsman: Winter's War, you know this channel isn't about surface-level hype or recycled commentary. Here, we aim to give you honest, high-effort insights into Hollywood blockbusters, upcoming releases, fan favorites, and even underrated gems, by diving deep into every layer. From cast performance and character development to visual effects, storytelling, and thematic resonance. Our goal is to make you feel like you're sitting in the theater with us, thinking, analyzing, and emotionally engaging with the story as it unfolds. We take pride in delivering reviews that are analytical yet conversational, comprehensive yet relatable. Every breakdown is designed to highlight not just what happens on screen, but why it matters, how it connects to film history, audience expectations, and industry trends. Whether you're a casual moviegoer, a dedicated fan, or a student of cinema, this channel gives you a lens to understand the full scope of a film's craft and impact. By subscribing, you'll get honest and thoughtful reviews of Hollywood's biggest blockbusters before you step into the theater, as well as analysis of visual effects, hidden details, and narrative intricacies that you might otherwise miss. We focus on realism, emotional intelligence, and human insight. No artificial hype, no robotic scripts, just cinema explored the way a film journalist or seasoned critic would approach it. So if you're ready to deepen your movie watching experience and get context that elevates every film beyond the screen, hit that subscribe button, turn on notifications, and join us for honest, in-depth reviews of the biggest Hollywood releases. This is your space for high-quality analysis, behind-the-scenes insights, and cinematic breakdowns that give you more than just a rating. They give you perspective, understanding, and appreciation for the art of film. Short description for this video: CTR optimized. Explore The Huntsman, Winter's War with an honest, in-depth review. From cast breakdown and plot insights to hidden details and blockbuster potential, get the full cinematic analysis you won't find anywhere else. Original AI-generated review for fan discussion purposes only. Top 10 hashtags and best CTR keywords. Hashtag Huntsman Winter's War. Hashtag Chris Hemsworth. Hashtag Emily Blunt. Hashtag Jessica Chastain. Hashtag Fantasy Movies. Hashtag Blockbuster Movies. Hashtag Movie Review 2026. Hashtag Action Fantasy. Hashtag Hollywood Movies. Hashtag Film Breakdown. Comma-separated tags: Huntsman Winter's War, The Huntsman, Winter's War Review, Chris Hemsworth Movie, Emily Blunt Ice Queen, Jessica Chastain Red Queen, Fantasy Action Movie, Hollywood Blockbuster Review, 2026 Movie Breakdown, Movie Analysis, Fantasy Film Review, Action Adventure Cinema. This channel is dedicated to providing viewers with honest, high-quality Hollywood movie reviews, giving you insights, behind-the-scenes facts, and detailed breakdowns of upcoming and blockbuster releases, so you can watch films with full context and understanding.